Our next speaker is another model for the rest of the world. Kevin Hyland was the first UK independent anti-slavery commissioner who led efforts in the UK and globally on human slavery and human trafficking and modern slavery. He came to that role following a career in law enforcement, including serving as head of the London Metropolitan Police Human Trafficking Unit, and perhaps of greatest interest to our discussions this week is he was also the founder of the Santa Marta Group here at the Vatican with Monsignor Sanchez, which represents a coalition of international law enforcement, civil society, NGOs, and the Catholic Church. And the Santa Marta Group and the work that Kevin has done is in many ways sort of a model for where we're going with the Child Dignity Alliance. So, Kevin, we're glad you're here.
Your Majesty, Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you for inviting me here today. As we know, we live in uncharted times. Our ability to communicate, trade, move finances, or explore this planet have all become something many enjoy, even feel is a right. The click of a button or the use of an app should be an innocent act, improving connectivity, education, accountability, and even enhancing human rights. But as we know, sometimes this can be far from the reality. The modern way of life has great benefits, but time is well overdue for this not-so-new highway, the internet and digital network, to be patrolled and subject of governance, just like the traditional highways, every day that we use and are controlled on. The child abuser or predator knocking door to door in a street, seeking their next victim, would attract strenuous condemnation and outrage, with immediate response by law enforcement, the public, and other statutory agencies. Yet, the same predator on the virtual highway is probably operating with impunity, will be unlikely to get ever caught, whilst at the same time fueling a multi-billion illicit network determined to benefit from destroying children's dignity and even taking children's lives. And what is there to counter this? What is the policy, the prevention that protects children from these abusers? As the menu of options such as online abuse, lifetime, paid for in London, Rome, New York, or Dublin, with the commodity abused in Southeast Asia is increasing, what are we doing? How low can our world sink? Has the moral compass turned 180 degrees off course, travelling against the tide for good, sailing plainly in support of evil? As we heard, this activity is often hidden or rationalised behind claims of seeing the bigger picture, in the greater good, such as for trade, or even quite perversely, in support of the rights of freedom or privacy. The presence of this abuse and modern slavery is a direct reflection of the current leadership in our world and the absence of ethical leadership. Human trafficking alone generates $150 billion a year in criminal assets. Great profit for criminals, while impunity reigns. And it's not just digital services and providers where serious child abuse occurs. What about the children in the cobalt mines and the mica mines, as young as 8 years of age, in dangerous conditions, excavating minerals for batteries to power our laptops and cell phones? The child in the DRC living and dying in a mine. The child in the Philippines ordered for live online sex. Do policies, and more importantly, responsibilities, extend to them? Or is it only the children in our communities who are considered? These children in the mines and in the Philippines are not the users of digital services. They are the abusers' prey. Who is looking out for them? I often hear of partnership and the need to work together, something I strongly advocate. It's important, but partnership is a tactic, not the outcome. What are the sanctions and the governance of such serious crimes of abuse? This year, tragically, 2 airliners crashed and there was the loss of 340 lives. The entire fleet of 387 Boeing planes were grounded. An investigation followed, litigation, 500 pilots in Ryanair alone, Europe's largest budget airline, were laid off, holidays affected, and other sanctions are likely to follow. Or a car manufacturer, for misleading on the efficiency of emissions, faced serious sanction. Yet when images of abused children are shared on platforms for real-time live abuse and available, or mines employ children where there is frequent loss of life, what company has been grounded, or who has even lost their job? Some say that sanctions and responsibility will drive business away, and they will create legal policies that protect themselves as opposed to protecting others. If that is the case, then the Pope's words yesterday are in vain. He asked us, look into the eyes of the children, our sons and our daughters. I believe to address child digital abuse, and the Santa Marta group does, that we need a 6-point plan to cover not just that, but all forms of human trafficking. Government procurement and businesses need to be compelled to examine their supply chains. Taxpayers' money must never end up in the hands of those who commit these serious crimes. Working with the G20 Interfaith Forum in Argentina and Tokyo this year, I secured commitment of all G20 world leaders to examine their procurement, but action is needed. We also need a notion of tainted money. No one should profit from child abuse. No one should profit from trafficking. Proceeds of crime is not enough. I know what proceeds of crime was, having headed departments, but that's not profit of child abuse. We need to look further. And when that money is seized, it needs to go to reparation and the fight against trafficking. We also need governance of the internet and digital providers, like the G20 has proposed for extremism and terrorism on the VECT project. Why should it be exempt? I can't understand why. We also need to review international legislation. The 1926 Convention Against Slavery did not plan for the digital age, so needs to be reviewed. And we need to work better with multi-agencies, the multilateral agencies, World Health Organization, Security Council, EU, Europol, and actually look at what is the role of the international criminal courts. And finally, and the 6th point, is the moral compass needs to be realigned. What has happened to our world when we need to negotiate a solution to end child abuse and trafficking? Without the right leadership, we will never achieve this goal. So people over profit needs to become the norm. If a business profits in billions, how much do they invest in protecting children? Would it ever extend to 1 or 2% of that profit? If so, that would be 10 to 20 million per billion of profit. That would make billions between the companies. Currently, OECD countries invest less than 1% of the 150 billion that the criminals earn. So it's an unfair fight. If companies did come together and invest 1%, imagine the pot to educate, imagine the pot to prevent this, the platforms that we could create. I think we could end this pretty swift. Leadership is crucial. Accountability is essential. And if your company does not take every step to prevent this abuse in destroying children, then we must make it clear that you are complicit. This week, the Norwegian Government Wealth Fund boycotted working with G4S, the provider of many UK government security and support services, due to their human rights violations, including human trafficking. The US has boycotted importing plastic gloves from Malaysia for the same reasons. So sanctions are necessary. Today, we will all return home in an aircraft that is tightly governed with rules, with technology running through it. Our safety is secured. Our safety is paramount and is governed, and sanctions are enormous if they let us down, who is looking after those children? Where is the sanction? Where is the governance? It's about us, not about them. This group, with faith leaders, can start that ethical leadership. They can collectively work together with the private sector to achieve standards like in the airline industry, or even like the emissions, or like in GDPR. But we're talking about children, and we're negotiating. Urgency is crucial. Facta non verba. Action, not merely words. But in the absence of action, there must be potential sanction. I believe the rights of the child and their protection outweighs any business priority. And if this group is serious, it can be the catalyst for this change to occur. Thank you.